Hi again. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has admitted that Europe's migrant crisis is the biggest challenge facing leaders right now.
Die Frage, wie wir mit den Flüchtlingen umgehen, diese Fragen werden uns sehr, sehr viel mehr noch beschäftigen als die Frage Griechenland und die Stabilität des Euro.
Meantime, Germany's neighbour Austria has recently been condemned for its handling of the migrant crisis. Amnesty International saying conditions at the country's main refugee camp there near Vienna are scandalous and they violate human rights, as it put it. In response, Austria's Interior Minister says they are trying to improve things, but the situation so far remains dire if you talk to the camp's inhabitants.
We were forced to sleep in the rain. There's not enough food.
The camp provides nothing but food, but the food is very bad and impossible to eat.
I have slept in the rain for 15 days.
Arabic news website editor Abdul Bari Atwan spoke to me about this earlier on. He says Europe's problem actually traces back to the West's intervention that brought the migrants' home countries to their knees in the first place.
If you look at these waves of immigration, they are coming, most of it from the Middle East, most of it actually via Libya in particular. Why? Simply because the NATO intervened by military means in this country, they toppled the regime, and they created a failed state, 2,000 kilometers of seashore, and nobody to police this seashore. So that's why the immigrants are pouring toward Europe from the Libyan borders, or from the Libyan seashore. This is the problem.
It wasn't that long ago, was it, that we had EU and US leaders very happy about that intervention in Libya in 2011.
You showed the world you would get rid of a dictator and you would choose freedom. Vive Benghazi! Vive la Libye! Vive l'amitié entre la France et la Libye!
The United States is committed to the Libyan people. You have won your revolution.
They promised the Libyan that it will be a prosperous country, it will be a stable country, and it will be a model of stability in the Middle East. Look what happened now after 4 years. It is a failed state. This is the outcome. Now we have Islamic State, we have Al-Qaeda, we have Ansar al-Islam, a lot of organizations, radical Islam organizations controlling the Middle East now, creating havoc there.
Seems now, too, that the surge of illegal immigrants in Europe's pitting neighbour against neighbour. France has stepped to controls on its border with Italy. That's causing problems, as Polly Boyk has been finding out.
Stuck between these rocks and a hard life. Illegal migrants in the Italian border town of Ventimiglia. France has closed off its border with Italy to anyone without a passport.
Well, this is the exact spot where the French Riviera and the Italian Riviera meet. It's the French town of Menton on this side and the Italian town of Ventimiglia on this side. Now, thanks to the European Schengen Agreement, it's quite simple for most people to make their way across to and from Italy, but it's not like that for everyone. Well, French police won't allow illegal migrants through to the French side of this Franco-Italian border. In fact, when they catch them on the French side, they simply pick them up and return them here to Italy, which is why a camp of illegal migrants has built up here on this Italian side. And in fact, many of them have made these rocks here on the beach their temporary homes. Now, many of the migrants tell me that they simply either want to stay in France, but the vast majority want to simply pass through. They want to go on to other countries, but they can't because they're stuck here.
I say to try by train to go to Paris, but the police catch me and return back to Ventimiglia.
How many times?
About 5 times, 6 times.
Local authorities on the Italian side are exasperated.
They've been taking advantage of this situation is what I think. Many of the people have been in France for a while and are now being brought back to Italy.
The French mayor of Menton insists they're acting according to EU law. The Dublin Convention rules that illegal migrants have to apply for asylum in the first country they land in Europe. But it probably needs an update.
It's an exorbitant burden for Italy, and I think it's unjust. The law didn't envisage situations like the one we're observing now, with a powerful influx of migrants. The Schengen Agreement needs to be rethought to account for the current situation.
And it goes on.
I honestly don't agree with the way France has behaved. They've put us in a difficult situation. I understand their problem on the other side of the border, but I don't find this tough stance to be fair.
What France is doing, it's the same as the British police, who don't want migrants passing from France into the UK, because the migrants in question came to Europe illegally.
We've seen armed police with bulletproof vests and other things at the border. It really gives me the impression that we've gone backwards to a time when borders still existed.
As long as Schengen demands that Italy shoulders responsibility for everyone that lands on their coastline, the situation is, as the French say, lousy.
And locals on both sides of the border also see things differently.
Why do they have more access to Italy than France? I don't know, because there's less surveillance on the coast of Italy than there is at the French border. It's a problem that they have.
The world is for everyone. It's not fair that France is returning people to Italy. Italy is full.
For now, hundreds of migrants' journeys into Europe have stalled here, at France's doorstep. Their presence causing increasing tension between old neighbours. Reporting from the towns of Ventimiglia and Menton on the Franco-Italian Mediterranean border, I'm Polly Boyko.
Of course, that's not just an isolated case. Some countries have gone further than border checks. They've put up physical barriers to keep out unwanted guests. Britain is trying to boost security to hold back migrants coming in from France. Also, too, Bulgaria has erected a razor wire fence at the border with Turkey. That's monitored around the clock. There's also a fence separating Spanish territories in Morocco from refugees trying to get inside. Another example, Hungary recently announced a controversial plan to build a wall almost 200 kilometres along the Serbian border. Now, it seems not all of America's on board in signing up to the same-sex marriage. It may have been made legal now nationwide and given a legal blessing. But a clerk in Kentucky's denied a gay couple their right to marry, stating her religious beliefs forbid her from doing so. What do you think about that? It's not the only case either. If you want to check out the story, give us your comments on it, starty.com. And there too, here's something you might not want to find lurking down in the woods today. Discover more about this Terminator-style robot being put through its paces. The issue of Islamic State has become a major topic of debate between US presidential hopefuls these days, with the contenders blaming each other for the emergence of the terrorist group. But the politicians have seemingly forgotten about years-old intelligence that shows it was Washington's own policies in the first place that led to the rise of the jihadists, as Ganachit Shikan's been finding out.
The question of how to fight ISIL has opened a can of worms in U.S. politics. Who is to blame for ISIL? U.S. presidential candidates exchange verbal jabs.
That premature withdrawal was the fatal error, creating the void that ISIS moved in to fill. Where was Secretary of State Clinton in all of this? Like the president himself, she had opposed the surge.
Jeb Bush is blaming anybody but his own brother, George W. Bush, for the fallout of the war in Iraq. Did not go unnoticed.
I find it somewhat curious that Jeb Bush is doubling down on defending his brother's actions in Iraq.
I think his brother probably said, hey, you're killing me. That was his war, and he looks very bad. So Jeb Bush tried to push back.
The way Jeb Bush is pushing back is raising many eyebrows.
I'll tell you, though, that taking out Saddam Hussein turned out to be a pretty good deal.
A deal that marked the beginning of ISIL and the killing of hundreds of thousands of people.
ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion, which is an example of unintended consequences.
But ISIL really began to thrive during the civil war in Syria. The former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency admitted that 3 years ago, U.S. policymakers had clear intelligence that, quote-unquote, the major driving forces behind the insurgency in Syria were extremists, and yet they chose to support the insurgents anyway.
The administration turned a blind eye to your analysis.
I don't know if they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision.
A willful decision to go support an insurgency that had Salafists, Al-Qaeda, and
a
Muslim
willful
Brotherhood.
decision to do what they're doing.
So what do the candidates plan on doing to fight ISIL? Hillary Clinton suggests she will continue the strategy of arming and training forces on the ground, including Syrian rebels, only more aggressively than President Obama. Most other White House contenders also call for various forms of military action. But Donald Trump takes it a notch further.
And ISIS is taking over a lot of the oil in certain areas of Iraq. And I said, you take away their wealth. You go and knock the hell out of the oil, take back the oil. We take over the oil, which we should have done in the first place.
It's going to take ground troops.
If you
what you're talking about is ground troops,
okay.
Maybe 25,000.
We're going to circle it. We're going to circle it. We're going to have so much money.
In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chekyan, RT.
All our news with your 24/7 fingertips course at RT.com. Here after the break, watching the Hawks, looking into the return of certain diseases thought long eliminated in the US.